All right. Good morning, everyone. Looks like we have opened up the lobby. Thanks to those of you that have jumped on to join us here today. We'll get rolling here. I know a few more people are probably going to be hopping in. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. So if you have to jump out early or anything like that, we'll certainly have the whole thing up on the eGroup website or on our YouTube channel here. So looking forward to getting this kicked off. This is Dan with eGroup. I'm an account executive here up in the DC area. And then also on board, we've got Jason Webster, who will handle the bulk of our presentation today. But let's go ahead and get rolling here. So first, we'll kind of take you guys through the agenda. I want to make sure that we hit on kind of what we plan to do with you all today, and we'll get started there. So Jason, if you're able to jump me over to the next slide, I can go ahead and get rolling. Perfect. So as far as how we're going to get to what we're talking about today with modern workplace roadmaps and what eGroup can do for you in that regard, we'll do that quick introduction that I mentioned around who eGroup is and what our focus is for those of you that maybe haven't worked with us before. I'll then be handing it over to Jason, who's actually going to dig into a lot more detail on the eGroup Modern Workplace Roadmap. And we've got a specific focus today around kind of certain ways to approach modern workplace and how we've broken that out. So we'll really dig into that and then follow that up with some common engagement samples. So work that we've done in the past, there's a lot of this stuff that while your needs as an organization are fairly unique, we're able to implement what we do with modern workplace and help you get to where you want to be a lot faster. So we'll talk about some examples that we've seen a lot of groups do. And then after that, we'll actually talk about how to get started. So like I mentioned, this is a kind of a workplace roadmap that eGroup provides, and we'll provide you with the info on how to actually navigate that, how to engage eGroup, and all that good stuff there. So from who is eGroup, for those of you that maybe don't know us or maybe just started learning about us, we've been around for over 20 years, and we have a very strong focus around our Microsoft partnership. We consider it two clouds, both the modern workplace, the Microsoft 365 side on the productivity suite, but also the Azure side. And so we've got a really deep bench in terms of our ability to deliver kind of start to finish, everything from architecture and design out to really specific projects around data protection, disaster recovery, VDI. So really anything in between, whether you're just starting on that journey or you've been there and need some help really getting it to a certain level, we've certainly got the capabilities to bring that to the table and help move you faster and to where you want to go. And like I said, we're fairly nationwide in terms of our approach, certainly saturated along the East Coast with our headquarters being in South Carolina. But as an organization, we can support your headquarters, your regional offices, and really make sure that you've got the coverage you need across the country here. From a solutions perspective, really the biggest thing that our customers see value in is our ability to kind of tie it all together, right? So we're not just a Microsoft focused shop. We've got the deep experience there, but what we really like to do for our customers is tie that into your on-premises and public cloud needs. So when we take a step back, how do we get you to a place where you want to be with your modern workplace tools? But also, how can we optimize and provide you similar levels of benefits across data center, across backup and disaster recovery, across networks and security? So as you'll see here, we've got a select number of strategic vendors that we work with to build out total solutions for our customers and really look at ways to consolidate the footprint of not just the actual physical equipment that you're dealing with, but the tools that you use to manage everything that you do day in and day out. So really what we might lead into with, hey, let's focus on device management, we can extend that out and talk about big picture and business continuity and how your mobile workforce is able to stay up and running, right? So that's really kind of our bread and butter, is honing in on the full solution across both the data center and the cloud. And Microsoft is obviously a big piece of that. So with that being said, that's a quick overview on eGroup. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be keeping an active eye on that, as will some of our other co-hosts here. But Jason, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you to get us started on the M365 adoption roadmap.
Thanks, Dan. Solid introduction. I appreciate it. Seeing a lot of familiar faces out there in the audience, but also some new ones as well. So that's exciting to see. Appreciate you all joining. As Dan mentioned, we're really going to talk about today about something we've done probably for maybe the last 4 or 5 years, which is a thing we've always called the Microsoft 365 adoption roadmap, or prior to the Microsoft 365 brand, we would call it the modern workplace adoption roadmap, where essentially we would help organizations. We would go do things like we would meet you at a Microsoft Technology Center, or we'd meet you in our office, your office, or kind of out to lunch, or maybe we did kind of a remote venue, wherever it was at. We would all get in a room for a day, maybe even two sometimes, and we would walk through the Microsoft 365 platform from an enablement standpoint to understand all the things that it can do, because we all know with Microsoft solutions, the real power isn't any one solution. It's the combination of a bunch of first party solutions designed to work together that creates a pretty efficient and simple environment. But also, any one solution isn't priced the way you might want it. And the bundling of these solutions is where you can really create the economies that you want to drive down costs for your overall IT spend. We would go through that and really look at it from an enablement standpoint, making sure that you all understood everything that was in the portfolio, but primarily understanding your business and understanding the unique needs, kind of the meet you where you're at. What solutions do you have today? And then the ultimate goal was to build you a roadmap, not just something that was marketing fluff, but an execution plan and a cost analysis and an ownership plan of exactly what everything looks like. For a 3 to 5 year period, so that you kind of had a full view of what adopting the Microsoft cloud would look like. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we still do that today, but obviously with the continuation of remote work, we've adapted that model to be a little bit more flexible and time conscious, because the opportunity to get 10, 12 people in a room for a full day and leave exhausted doesn't happen as often as it does as it used to. So we'll tell you a little bit about how we can deliver those same results in what we call mini sessions. Before we get started, as I try to do in all of these programs, is let where the incentives are. As you can see on the left, we do a lot of work in Microsoft Azure, and there's a lot of incentive programs. For those of you that may have attended the webinar last week where we were talking about the solution assessment program, I mentioned that there's a lot of incentives on the Microsoft 365 side. So the idea here is want to always connect you to where there are services dollars provided by Microsoft or programs that can help you learn, do more, increase your security, adopt things. There are both structured and flexible programs that allow us to do all that between Microsoft 365 Everywhere, the security adoption, as well as Teams adoption, and then flexible spending based on licensing and some of those things that we've all enjoyed over the years. If you have any questions on where the dollars are to kind of support some of your objectives, we're happy to have those conversations as well. So when we talk about Microsoft 365, the term Microsoft 365 really encompasses Office 365, what we call enterprise mobility and security, and then Windows 10, now Windows 11, right? It's going to have to update a few of the slides as Windows 10 was not the last numbered version of Windows. So the idea there is it brings together the whole end user productivity suite, everything from email to file sharing to collaboration into the endpoint. How do we secure that? How do we protect from antivirus, both in the cloud, at the endpoint, and in between? All of those different things along the way. And how does IT administer, update, manage, and patch solutions with things like Intune in the middle to ensure that when you, from the moment your end user pulls a laptop out of the box, they're able to authenticate, corporate policies get enrolled, everything gets pushed to it that they need, everything's tied to their single identity, that identity is secure, and they're able to do their jobs as quickly and as effectively as possible with as few touch points from IT as possible. That's ultimately the goal of what we're trying to do with Microsoft 365, is really enable that end user productivity so they can do what they do to drive the business forward, but also support IT in more efficient and consistent capabilities to be able to deliver on security, data protection, and all of the things that IT needs to do to keep the business safe. Where we've done that in the roadmap workshop is really starting, and you'll see this hasn't really changed over time. Like everything starts with a secure identity. Security, the word secure is a loaded term. There's a lot of things in there, but everything starts with security. Security at the endpoint, security of the identity, security of the various Microsoft solutions as well as external solutions. Having a solid security policy to ensure that people accessing your information are who they say they are, and they should be accessing it from locations and from devices that they want. So we'll talk a lot about secure identity. That comes in many forms, everything from multi-factor authentication to single sign-on to conditional access policies, those types of things that we plan for, driving all the way through, what does it mean for your users? Like, and this isn't, hey, everybody does a single thing. It's really, what does it mean for your users in your business to collaborate? Who do they need to collaborate with? Is it an internal facing collaboration? Is there a lot of client facing collaboration, partners, vendors, those types of things? Secure remote work. I mean, it's hard to even, I guess the term remote work is still very, very appropriate, but it's kind of the new norm. Everybody's generally remote, or every organization has some level of remote work, if not as their predominant posture today. How do we do that? And all the stresses that we've learned over the last couple years that remote work provides on traditional systems. How can we solve those with cloud-based systems? Mobile device management being one of them, kind of talking about how do we get those devices, not just laptops and desktops, but also iPads, iPhones, Android devices, and everything in between. How can we integrate calling? That was another big learning lesson over the last couple of years, that centralized call center deployments worked well until the call center no longer had the employees centralized in the same building, and we needed to expand that out. How can we simplify voice and calling solutions so that one number, one dial, it reaches the person where they need to be reached, but also gives them the privacy when they don't want to be reached. Business process automation, making things more efficient, obviously through low code, no code solutions. How can end users, automate processes so that they can be more efficient with their days? And then ultimately, the other side of security, things like data loss prevention and data protection, is where we can really, as people have heard me said plenty of times, your environment is only as secure as your ability to recover everything really fast. That's just the challenges we face in IT today. That security is building high walls and making sure that we're only letting the good actors in, but at the same time, it's the ability to recover everything we need to in the events of a breach, as well as not just recovering everything, but understanding if there is a breach, that there was a breach and what information was potentially exposed. So we can talk about that from a compliance and data loss prevention standpoint. Ultimately, now that you kind of feel it, if you haven't been through one of those roadmap sessions, that was a lot to talk about in a day. And if you had a big lunch, everybody was really sleepy around 3:30 and starting to look to wrap it up. So, but at the same time, our goal in that was to deliver a roadmap that started with that understanding of your business needs. So in an 8-hour day, we might spend the first hour to 3 hours discussing your current posture, what the future of the organization looks like, what your users need to succeed, those types of things from a productivity standpoint, but also the technical requirements around compliance and those type of things. Develop that shared vision. This is where, we start to whiteboard and throw solutions against the wall and start to talk about what the future might look like, start to do some of the education, answer some of the finer questions on how solutions work and how they can meet those needs that you have. And then ultimately building an actionable plan where the action word in there is actionable, something that you can really isn't just saying like, hey, buy Microsoft 365. It's buy Microsoft 365. This is how we're going to implement it. This is what it's going to cost. These are the incentives available for you to do so, and exactly what that end state would look like, so that we can, so that when you do make a purchase, you can avoid that trap of acquiring a lot of technology in bundles that you never actually deploy. So how have we changed that going forward? Basically, we've taken that large engagement which we can still do. And we still have Microsoft incentive programs and funding to do a complete roadmap to ensure that you're getting the most out of Microsoft 365. And we're starting to be able to do some of those on premises again in certain situations. But also virtually, we can break it up into multiple sessions across the week to be able to deliver that fully encompassing roadmap. But at the same time, break it into its parts, what we call a menu of solutions through Microsoft 365. Some of those being starting with identity and security. Like if you need to know more about secure identity, where how Azure AD, multi-factor authentication, and single sign-on interact in the environment. When can you use things like Microsoft Azure AD, single sign-on, and MFA, versus when do you need a third-party MFA to do some other things to try to find the right mix? How does it all integrate so that you can ultimately say that my administrative users, my admins accessing network devices and servers, accessing my cloud, accessing endpoints, customer third-party SaaS apps are going through all the same policies that we need them to ensure that those applications are secure? We can cover that, and we can cover that in about an hour, where we'll ask you some questions before the engagement, get the lay of the land, and then we'll talk through some of the solutions and ultimately come up with some action items coming out of that of how the solution can work for you, where we go back and then we make a proposal on exactly what that solution would look like. Since that's the first one I've presented, I would say mileage may vary, depending on complexity and some of the things. You may spend 30 minutes, we may need to spend a couple hours, but in general, about an hour is right for most of these mini engagements to be able to arrive at an actionable plan. The second one is, when you talk about the identity secured, part of identity security is securing your devices so that we can incorporate that in those identity policies, but also being able to manage, update, patch, protect, and ultimately have every device on the same footprint from a security standpoint. Anybody that's kind of done the SCCM management or the hey, my patching tool lives in my data center, not in the cloud, and I'm reliant upon VPNs. I ship a device out, it may never connect back to our network again. So group policy hasn't been updated in 2 years. We haven't been able to reach it for patches. Those types of challenges, that's what we're looking to solve, to ensure that all the devices are on the same footprint from a security standpoint, but actually we can start to use the fact that they are and that they're enrolled in something like Intune as another signal for how much should we challenge that user for multi-factor authentication. Are they on a device? Are they in the office? If it's a device we know and they're in the office, we can probably be a little more relaxed. If they're out of country and that's something that's rare for them, using some of the the intelligence of the cloud, we can flag it for additional inspection and before we allow access. Those types of things. All that kind of rolls up into mobile device management. So about an hour to learn how Intune, SCCM co-management, if you still have on premises SCM, if you're using other platforms like, Workspace ONE, formerly AirWatch, those types of things, as well as Autopilot, can help you manage end user devices, make sure that they stay connected and they stay up to date. Continuing on in the security side, endpoint protection around not just managing device, but using Defender to manage antivirus, malware, all of that. Not just from actually putting, malware scans on the device. Obviously, we can do that with, Defender for endpoints, but we can also do Defender for Office 365 and make sure that we have good AV, machine learning scanning, risk prevention from the machine learning capabilities and the AI capabilities in there, so that when emails are received, every link is clicked through, all documents are inspected before they're delivered to the end user. If an end user clicks on something that's a risky behavior, we can flag that. And we can do that both at the endpoint from a centralized standpoint, as well as with cloud-based solutions, whether they're interacting with files on SharePoint or OneDrive, or whether they're emailing files back and forth. How can we secure those endpoints from an antivirus, malware protection, and prevention standpoint? That covers the overly used 99.9% of things that you have today. but certainly doesn't cover those 0-day threats where, ransomware it has lived and been successful for a long time. But good, it's a good layer there, pretty simple and all integrated into the platform that we can talk about, and how we can make that not just something you do on your laptops, but something we do in the cloud, in your data center, as well as across the SaaS platforms as well. Next on there, and this one is really a foundational checkbox, in my opinion, for organizations that haven't gone through this and they're deploying Microsoft 365 solutions, whether they're just using it for Exchange Online or they're using a lot of the different tools in the suites. The idea of having solid governance, data loss prevention, and compliance controls in your environment is important. And Microsoft invests a lot in things like Compliance Center, the DLP controls that you can put in place, as well as the ability to customize governance models to ensure that your data resides only where you want it to reside. Things like, preventing outside sharing of certain information, being able to flag sensitive information, being able to, do things like e-discovery and litigation holds and all of the things that we need to do to run the business and protect sensitive data. As well as compliance templates. If you're going through things like PCI or even like looser standards like HIPAA, or even some of the larger ones out there. There's quite a few of those. We can apply compliance templates that help you out of the box, meet 95% plus the compliance requirements that you have for those regulations, because Microsoft knows those. There's pre-built templates. We can do it. We can talk about how we can use Compliance Center to apply compliance to your environment, as well as, manage it. But again, it's kind of foundational. I mean, it starts with your first workload. You don't want to put information that you own into Microsoft 365 without having a good foundation to build upon that adheres to your business standards. So something we can layer in there. And that's where I would say, like, if you're looking at a couple of these menu options, there's nothing limiting us to doing one. Let's tick off all the ones that you're interested in and we want to go through, and we can build a customized agenda to be able to deliver these to you and get you the information you need to move forward. Moving beyond the security side of it a little bit, talking another one that's obviously very, very important. We're doing it right now is modern collaboration, and that's how Microsoft Teams can bring many, many worlds together. And you even heard, for those that were paying attention to the Microsoft Ignite and the announcement that was made yesterday, there's a new product coming out called Microsoft Loops that will be part of the Microsoft 365 suite that aims to even further change how Teams interacts with document co-collaboration, sharing, and things like that, to move some of that work out of the actual Word document, right, or out of the Excel document into more modern collaborative, co-collaborative workspaces. That's about all the details I have on it. It was pretty exciting announcement. It's kind of a change moment for how people are going to work and collaborate on information. But that said, I fully expect the Word document and the Excel spreadsheet to be alive and well for many years to come, based on the momentum we have. But the idea here there was with Teams collaboration is really, how do we bring everything together? Your chat, your phones, your webinars, how you engage internally, how you engage externally. I can say this has absolutely changed how I engage externally, particularly with partners. If I need to get something from somebody at Microsoft, I just open up a chat and start chatting with them. Do that with a lot of our clients as well, and kind of make sure that, we kind of reduce the volume of email and get a little bit more interactive back and forth. It doesn't have so many delays. So how can we do that? How can we find those different routes that your organization needs to collaborate internally, as well as with your vendors, partners, clients? That's what we're looking to learn, so that we can build an effective team strategy to bring all those solutions together. And then the integration of voice. I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, how legacy call centers and things like that do present some challenges. They obviously present some cost challenges for running them, but how can we use Teams, whether that's an Apple CarPlay device when you're driving down the road, whether that's the Teams client on your mobile phone, whether that's your laptop or an actual desk phone that you have enabled for Teams, to be your voice solution and connected into Microsoft calling plans with 911 services, all of the things that we need, or even third-party calling plans with all of the same, to be able to unify everything from, someone texting you to being able to call you to being able to make a voice dial, or you to be able to make voice dials out for things like call center purposes, or marketing efforts, all the things that we need to do from a business standpoint. How can we bring that voice conversation together and have it all be on one client so that we can access people where they're needed with kind of one number, but also use things like do not disturb very effectively so that people aren't being called 24 hours a day when they don't need to be. Webinars and live events, actually what we're doing today. We use the Teams webinar quite a bit. There is another version of this if you all haven't experienced it, called live events. We like the webinar format for things like this. They're a little bit smaller, more intimate groups, probably less than 50 people typically, where everybody can really collaborate, ask questions, chat, and do things like that. Very much similar to a Teams meeting. When we do things like live events, that's more broadcast, where the people can't see everybody. They don't know who's in the meeting. They can ask questions, but all the questions are moderated before they get posted, and more broadcast style type things with some features. All of those are available so that you can connect to your customers. We can have meetings exactly how we do that, and try to map out, when to use a webinar, when do I do a live event, when do I just do a meeting, those types of things. But ultimately, how do I license and enable this, and how do I train my team so that they can use it effectively? It's just another way, in a very effective way, that adopting a full Microsoft 365 suite allows you to peel off some of those external costs, some of those just single costs that you may have, into a bundled solution, drive down your overall cost of IT, but also simplify everything into the same platform, as well as security model to increase your security. And then I won't spend a lot of time on these. We all know there's still what we call the normal block and tackle of Microsoft 365, which is we still spend a lot of our time migrating people to Exchange Online, whether that's moving from legacy platforms, whether that's moving from on-premises Exchange systems into Exchange Online, or what has become more popular these days, mergers and acquisitions, and requiring people to separate tenants from each other or combine tenants so that organizations become all one organization, one domain, one email address. We do those all the time, and we have the ability to walk you through that. It's really a matter of where are you today? Where do we need to be? How do we establish that common baseline? And what are the tools we need to get there so that we can map out those migration approaches? And when it comes to OneDrive, this is all about allowing people to have flexible access to files. And what does that mean to you all? I think there's a really good OneDrive story with kind of the enterprise state PC around, where whether you're using a virtual desktop or whether you're using a thick client, whether you're using a mobile device or your phone, having all your files in one SaaS-based platform that's designed to work together allows you to access those files more readily. And I can say one of the biggest change moments I've had over the years personally is I stopped, never really thought I would stop doing this. I stopped really using File Explorer to find my files. If I have a PowerPoint presentation like today where I'm presenting Microsoft 365, I tend to just open PowerPoint and start typing in words that are relevant to what I'm looking for right into the unified search there. And it pulls that information from OneDrive, SharePoint, all of my different cloud sources, Teams, to be able to find that. And it's kind of become my default way of finding things. So I don't have to sit there and worry so much about the navigational tree structures and those types of things and multiple copies of files. So we can talk about that and how we get users to adopt some of those new ways, but also how do we, when you launch something like OneDrive or even a file share migration, which is a little further down this list, to something like SharePoint Online, how can we provide those modern experiences, but also still provide the S drive access that people are familiar to without having to have the on-premises storage to support it. SharePoint Online, similar story. We can obviously do that with a file share migration, But SharePoint is still a very, very effective tool, and we still do a lot of work around migrating portals. How communications platforms, we use these internally at eGroup. A lot of our clients use them. How do you effectively communicate to the organization? One thing I love about SharePoint Online in this aspect, and what we've been able to do, those on the call that have worked with me and known me for a while, and my background is all the way back to SharePoint before it was called SharePoint, and working with a lot of these platforms. And there was things I loved about the breadth of everything that SharePoint could do from a possibility standpoint. But as you get further in your career, you realize simplicity is success, and what SharePoint Online delivers is a much narrower view of what it provides, which is ultimately a content platform to deliver information that your team needs to be able to do their jobs, just or be able to as a central hub for accessing automations and workflows and forms and those types of things, but also as a repository of information that you want to govern as a single source of truth. So SharePoint is still alive and well in that aspect, but some of the things that we saw over the years help organizations make SharePoint a mess is, all the automation capabilities and all that stuff has moved over to Power Automate. A lot of this, the My Site document, kind of the internal Facebook type stuff's moved to OneDrive. A lot of the chat and collaborations moved to Teams. So SharePoint has been broken into its parts with purpose-built apps to deliver more concise and simplistic experiences. So whether you're looking to take legacy SharePoint, move it to SharePoint Online, we've seen great success in doing that. And I think what we found is organizations enjoy the SharePoint Online experience more than they have some of the other homegrown content management systems you've seen in the past. Power Platform is another topic that we talk a lot about. This is all about enabling users to ingest data from multiple sources. Maybe it's from a form, maybe it's from a different solution that's, maybe it's from a known thing like a payroll system. How do we connect information? How do we run it through low code to no code automation systems? And how do we create workflows that allow information to flow within an organization to where it needs to be, but also present that information into things like KPIs, dashboards, reports, and stuff from a business intelligence effort. There's a lot of power in, pun intended, in the Power Platform, because it does give the ability to develop everything from simplistic mobile apps to, being able to take complex systems and automate them with the if then else logic without having to write a lot of code or any code at all to be able to make those connections. And Power Platform has an extensive list of third-party applications that you can integrate into to pull information as well as push information that are outside of the Microsoft ecosystem that don't require you to write those integrations yourself. So this is all about driving efficient business processes, reduction of paper, reduction of manual things, reduction of signatures required on things, all those HR, finance, approval, capital expenditure type things are very common use cases for the Power Platform. Modern file shares, probably one of the most important things we're doing today to combat ransomware, which is eliminating the Windows file server. And the idea here is, if you have a Windows file server, it's a breeding ground for ransomware. A lot of ransomware attacks happen there. That's where it tries to spread, goes throughout the organization, and then ultimately gets at the heart of your corporate files, the information people need to do their jobs. The cloud doesn't prevent that, but it mitigates a significant amount of the risks. And in this session, what we talk about is, where are your file shares today? Where are those stores of corporate information? Are they Windows file shares? Are they third party? Are they databases? How can we use tools like OneDrive, Azure Files, third-party solutions on top of Azure, or even SharePoint Online document libraries with Teams as the front end to house that information so that you can ultimately relieve yourself of storage on premises that is expensive, relieve yourself of the secondary storage you need to protect that. I think we're all learning that even like storage snapshots aren't good enough for backups anymore. I've heard several stories of file shares where people's insurance requirements for things like ransomware require them before renewal to not have a system based on, server snapshots anymore. It has to be something a little more immutable, a little bit more advanced. So all of these conversations about how can we modernize your file shares so that we can put them in the cloud, we can have multiple copies of them, and then we can leverage the capabilities of the cloud, the intelligence, the security, and all those things to keep it secure. And then we can simplify the data protection, going back to my statement of, how do we recover everything really fast in the event of an attack. All of those things are possible, and all those things help organizations relieve themselves of a significant amount of effort and cost within the data center. So that's really what we would talk about there. As you can see, this is the only one that lasts 1 to 2 hours. It can be a little bit of an extensive conversation because, I'll say 9 out of 10 conversations we have, we start the conversation with, okay, tell me about your files. And every organization goes, I don't really know where everything is, right? So we have to work through some of those things. And that's the other great thing about modern file shares. That intelligence, all that compliance regulation we talked about earlier, all the governance, all of those things, they're just baked into the platform. You used to have to buy third party and integrate, or maybe couldn't, budget for to do, exist to allow you to have that so that you know where your information is, you know where your sensitive information is, and you can secure it appropriately as well as provide that flexible access. And then lastly, before I get into some of the examples that we were talking about, Azure Virtual Desktop, people are always like, well, Azure Virtual Desktop isn't really a modern workplace Microsoft 365 solution. But it is, right? Because it does encompass that Windows 10 component for it. And we see a lot of organizations leveraging Azure Virtual Desktop for a couple of use cases. One is quick device replacement. Devices destroyed, they need to be able to provide something for it. Azure Virtual Desktop is an extremely low-cost solution that can have 2 desktops in it or 2,000 almost instantaneously if you plan properly for it. And you only pay for when you need it. So, if you need to keep people productive, you're onboarding new employees, you're struggling with device turnaround times and things like that, Azure Virtual Desktop can help you, blur those lines a little bit to get through some of those challenges. But also providing things like remote vendor access, not even into infrastructure, but even into other SaaS applications to ensure, that you're providing a landing spot for people that you don't manage to come into your environment and do work for you and things along those lines, as compared to things we've done with like Citrix and Horizon in the past. Azure Virtual Desktop, its burstability, the enormous amount of burstable SKUs we can use in Azure help you do this. And the reason it's part of a Microsoft 365 solution is we can deliver those Windows 10 experiences to those users. We can deliver it as a thing where people have a device, but certain activities they need to go in there to do. And we can do that in an extremely cost-effective way compared to traditional VDI solutions to be able to solve some of those niche challenges. And as time goes on with the Microsoft 365 desktop, what you're going to see is a blending of these two capabilities to be able to deliver, cloud-based desktops and to some people or all people with a simplified SKU. And then lastly, the thing that I've been talking a lot about for probably the last 6 months to a year is that one of the things that we want to talk about that we haven't always had to talk about is protection for Microsoft 365. Threats are on the rise. There are a lot of examples of both malicious and accidental attacks on Microsoft 365, even Google, all the SaaS-based platforms. There's a study out there that says 46% of businesses in North America store critical data, like 40% or 46% of their critical data is in Microsoft 365 solutions. And Microsoft says right in their user agreements and things like that we recommend that you protect it with a third-party solution. This is more important than ever because there are examples and rising examples of Microsoft 365 environments being compromised with the advanced malware. Very similar to ransomware, very similar to those types of capabilities. And there's also where maybe governance was a little bit lax, or accidents happen. I think KPMG was the big one that hit the papers about thousands of users being deleted, and that data was lost because of an accident. So protecting this information, and Microsoft confirmed that that information was deleted. They went through all the actions. They went through their 30-day things. They went through exactly, met the SLAs for that, and that information was unrecoverable. So having a secondary backup of this is a low cost, need to have solution for Microsoft 365. I mean, you're talking in the range of kind of like $2 to $4 per user type solutions that are out there. One of our favorites is an industry leading solution with Rubrik that does both data center cloud management and Microsoft 365 protection. But being able to protect those environments is critical. So won't continue to harp on it, but that's something that we're having a lot of conversations about because it's incredibly important to protecting that cloud data. Just don't assume that the 30-day recycling bin will be able to do it for you, or the speed to recovery in a scaled out attack from those standard types of things is going to be quick enough. So as Dan mentioned early on, just wanted to lay out a few of our most common engagements, kind of things that we're seeing out there. Obviously, I just hit on one with the protection side of it. But number one has absolutely been that we've been working on with a lot of organizations is modernized security and management of endpoints. Whether that's Intune, whether that's Defender, whether that's single sign-on activities, autopilot, biometric authentication, when to integrate things like Cisco Duo into the environment, but secure endpoints, modernizing patch management systems, helping, as you can imagine, over the last couple of years, organizations going remote. It's become the technology's evolved rapidly, as well as the use cases there to be able to provide this type of management. It's kind of overtaken what is the second and third one, almost combined, I would say, which is Teams adoption. Once they're there, people have been in the environment for a while. They've been using it for mail. They've been using it for files. How do we start to bring these things together, and how do we start to leverage Teams? How do we move from Slack to Teams? How do we move from Zoom to Teams so that we're all in the same ecosystem? These things work together. I can take advantage of all the integrations between them. Those types of things, do webinars. That's been another one we've had for a variety of use cases. Same but different for every organization. Migrations. Migrations are still live and well, as I mentioned earlier. How do we do these migrations? How do we move things from here to there? That's ultimately, we always say, people like, we do these 100 times, things that an organization only does once. Our value in this conversation is that we can tell you exactly how to do it, help make that smooth. And then ultimately, what I like to present a lot on is help you do the extra things like communication plans, enablement plans, and training plans for your end users, so that we don't just technically migrate people, but we prepare them for the change that's coming, and ensure that day one success is there once we cut them over and they feel really good about what they have. File share migrations, that's been on the rise quite a bit. People want to get rid of file shares. Some of it's ransomware driven, some of it's cost driven. That's what we see a lot of. The Isilon systems and things like that aren't cheap. And certainly having two of them and then cross-replicating across data centers to do that is an expensive conversation. Taking advantage of cheap and deep cloud storage, as well as the web ability to deliver that information securely where it needs to be, has been a very effective platform for reducing data center footprints and reducing that cost. And then lastly, the security part of the conversation. It's number 5, but there isn't a part of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 that this doesn't happen into. So like, how can we reduce your ransomware risk? How can we enhance your recovery? How can we meet your compliance requirements? And how can we secure that remote access and all that? All of that is centered around ensuring that you don't get compromised and that you're meeting your compliance needs and that you have everything that you got. So as I wrap up here, what I want to ask, kind of our call to action here, is that, again, We have our modern workplace Microsoft 365 roadmap session where we can talk about this holistically, understand where your organization is at, and map all the different components that you need so that you have a plan of exactly what you need as well as right fit for the licensing and the how you're going to implement it across all these complex topics. Or most organizations are far along in one, not far along in the other. Maybe they're not doing data protection today. We can have those single conversations. So my ask of you all is if any of these topics interest you, we now offer them as mini sessions. So just kind of reach out, give me a shout, tell us what modules, one to many that work for you. We'll get you connected up with the right eGroup team. We'll have a conversation to finalize those details. We'll want to know some things in advance so that we can make it relevant to you. And then we'll work with you or your broader team, the people that need to be involved, to execute on those workshops and help you get those roadmap plans that you're looking for, so that you can kind of take the next steps or start to plan the next steps as we look forward to 2022. So with that, we'll come to a close today. Hope this information was helpful. Hope I provided a few ideas